This is the 20th season of Bass Talk Live. BTL is presented by Bass Cat Boats, Strike King Lures, AFTCO, Pro Guide Batteries, Spro, Gamakatsu, The Bass Tank, Denali Rods, Beatdown Outdoors, and Sunline.
BTL coming at you.
Good morning and welcome to another exciting edition of BTL Bass Talk Live, where we are going to talk about bass fishing. I made it through my European vacation, first time headed over there. It was quite the experience. Got to fish Loch Ness, which was pretty cool, bucket list item. But, while I was gone, I was keeping an eye on all things going on in the world of professional bass fishing. And boy, we had a couple barn burners go down, and we still have a barn burner that's going down right now. The Elite Series had a day canceled on Lake Champlain. It's very rare between the BPT and the Elite Series that you can do like 4 or 5 events up north when you take St. Clair, Champlain, and Thousand Islands into it, and then get 4 or 5 consecutive days where these guys can get out and safely compete on the fishery. That was the case on Champlain. They canceled day 2 of the event. So currently we have a Monday championship, which I've never understood why either the BPT or the Elite Series don't end their events. Like, I understand for the on location weigh in, you end it on a Sunday, but like Monday morning, guys, that's like the money time. That's when we get the most downloads, the most views on the podcast, on the show, on BTL. Everyone's back in the office. Like, a Monday championship is money because guys can have it on in the background. They're not at cookouts. They're not at baseball games. They're not fishing their own tournaments. Like, every time that the Elite Series is gone with a canceled day and a Monday finish, I feel like, and I understand with the programming, with what they have with Fox Sports and stuff, that doesn't make it logistically, but just from the fan perspective, I love a Monday finish on the Elite Series. And we will get into that later in the show. Hamner with the opportunity to do something that hasn't been done since the 2010 and 2011 season when KVD won the Classic. I believe that would have been on Lay Lake and Louisiana, and then also won the Angler of the Year later in that season. Mark Davis, the one who previously did that during the 1995 season, I believe. So Hamner looking to join some pretty rare company. We also wrapped up the Bass Pro Tour regular season in what I thought was an awesome final round. I actually turned that thing on and watched probably 3/4 of the final day with John Hunter and Hatfield and Michael Neal battling it out. And like, listen, guys, I'll be honest. It's easy to catch fish on the St. Lawrence River. I think that's been proved through all of the tournaments that have been there. It is not easy to catch fish on the St. Lawrence River with a 30-mile-an-hour wind, regardless of what direction it is blowing. To watch those guys try to get dialed in and catch what they caught. Michael Neal, really great to see him get a win on that. And man, you can talk about like some clutch stuff in the last where he had saved some areas that he hadn't fished and just dunk and pulled away to get his second BPT win. I don't think it was a surprise to anybody that Jacob Wheeler came into this. He had kind of his destiny in his own hands, gets his 3rd Angler of the Year title in the past 4 years. It would have been 4 for 4 had it not been for a miraculous Matt Becker performance last year in the final event of the season. And while we're talking about it, let's just bring in the current Angler of the Year right there, Jacob Wheeler. Thanks for taking time. I know you're driving home. It's been really hectic. You saw you had your family up there, the big checks, the trophies, all that. Thanks for pulling over on the side of the road with the big check behind you and jumping on BTL, Jacob.
Yeah, man. I always enjoy coming on, and yeah, I appreciate it, man. I appreciate you having me.
Congratulations, first of all, 3rd in the past 4 years. I mean, talk about going into this week. You kind of knew that if you came in and you took care of business, there were only a couple guys that could catch you, but a decent tournament, and you'd salt this thing away with limited stress. Is that kind of how it went down?
I mean, it didn't. What was crazy was like practice was actually pretty tough, and when I went to the St. Lawrence because it's the every fish counts format. Like I was like, you know what? I want to still have some largemouth in the back burner. You know, if the wind blows, you know, you sort of hit on it there. It's like easy to generate bites a lot of times when the conditions are perfect on the St. Lawrence. But when things get pretty tough and the wind gets to blowing a little bit, it makes it, the current gets backed up, the fish change positioning. So I wanted to have some largemouth on the back burner. And after first 2 periods or period and a half on day one of competition, basically the way it's set up points wise, if I made the knockout round, the top 20, no one could catch me. And so like I sort of pulled the plug on my smallmouth stuff. I was having a tough time generating bites. It was decent conditions, but I just was not having I didn't really find the best smallmouth in my practice. So I went largemouth and caught like 35 pounds in the next period and a half and put myself in a position. And so that was like, it was fun. I was picking up a flipping stick, 50-pound braid, a Bronco bug, and just going flipping. And that was like, it was really fun to do.
Well, I think I know Cliff Crochet cashed a check too. I think he was flipping like that. How many of the guys out of the 79 competing would you say mix largemouth into their game plan this past week?
I think Fletcher, Adrian, there were several guys there was like a handful of guys that committed to it. And then there was guys, I don't think anybody committed to it that was inside the top 20. It's so hard to, even in even in an average fish counts format, there's just so many more smallmouth than there is largemouth on the St. Lawrence, and it's just hard to compete when, in that side of it. But I mean, I caught 60% of the bass I weighed in were largemouth throughout the duration of the tournament. So I mean, it was different. I didn't really expect that to happen. It just sort of happened that way. So I mean, no one made the top 10 that I know of fishing for largemouth. But I think Jason Vance had a couple of his, like he mixed it in. So probably I would say like 10% or 20%. I would say 25% mixed it in, and I would say probably 10% of guys committed to it.
You had a really strong year this year. I'm looking at your stats, and I've got one day highlighted on here that I would look back on and say that was the day that really cemented your Angler of the Year season. I'm curious if you have that day that sticks out to you, and if we're thinking of the same day here.
Yeah, to me, it's definitely day 2 at Eufaula.
That's what I got right there. You had 8 fish for 21.11 after only catching 2 for 314 on the first day.
And that was, obviously Eufaula was very, very unique. The water came up so much. It was coming up, a half a foot to a foot a day. It stabilized, and making a decision to abandon like fishing sort of that mid-depth stuff for the largemouth that were still staging and some still spawning, going and swimming a jig on fresh willow brush and throwing a frog. That was the day that made all the difference. And I think that, I look back at the tournaments and I'm like, man, that was the one that like, I didn't know how it was going to play out and to make the top 20 cut in that tournament. That was for sure the decisions that day made all. I mean, I'll tell you a situation, or like a scenario like that day I was fishing. I made all the right, it just sort of like everything worked out. I made all the right decisions. At the end of the period, I skip a frog up underneath this willow, and I don't get a bite. Perfect cast, don't get a bite. So I'm rigging up my stuff. I grab another frog out, and I rig it up, and I'm like, I make a cast at the start of the second period, the same like up on the bank, and I get hung up, and I'm like, I don't want to blow that willow out, even though I just fished it. I break that frog off that was hung up on this little bush, like inside. And I pick up my other frog and cast the same willow I just cast to at the end of the period. And I catch a 3-pounder on a frog. And it was like those, like, it was those moments, like in that decision, like, like there's gotta be a bass on that willow. And like, that was the kind of stuff that happened that day. Like, it was just the right decisions, the right times, and caught enough bass to make the
cut. Your first Angler of the Year on the BPT came in 2021. I'm curious, style-wise, lot of talk in the industry on what 2025 is going to look like. Not only who's in and out of the field, you guys are going to a 65 boat field. The Elite Series hasn't announced anything yet, but from a tactics, a strategy wise, look back on that 2021 season, compare it to the 2024 season. Has your style changed any from then to now? Because I feel like the style as a whole in professional bass fishing has completely done a 180 just during that time frame.
Yeah, I think in that season I won. It was a season that I won 3 tournaments, and I won them. Like I caught them skipping skipping docks of the chatterbait on Travis. I caught them flogging smallmouth on the St. Lawrence, and I caught them scoping smallmouth. And I used an active target on Champlain. This year was a little bit of, I mean, I wouldn't say it was too much different. I mean, James River, a chatterbait played a huge role in that. Of course, Toledo Bend and Dale Hollow was definitely driven by bait eaters with like a freeloader and a mooch minnow. And then you like go to the James, you go to Eufaula, grind and shallow. The St. Lawrence River, flipping reeds and catching largemouth. I wouldn't say it's changed that much. I think you still have to be to win Angler of the Year. You have to be versatile overall. Like to me, that's like always something that I've hung my hat on, is trying to be as versatile of an angler as possible. And I don't necessarily think I've changed that awful much. I do think there's a little bit more spinning rod and finesse game in the game now than there has. But I wouldn't say it was like, I think that year I got second to Kevin on Chickamauga, fishing offshore, schools of bass, Tennessee River. I mean, so there was a real diverse year anyway, but I don't think it was like, I don't really know if there was like anything that crazy different.
You're in some pretty rarefied air right now. When I first got into the game covering this thing, it was 2007. It was that run of 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 with Kevin Van Dam. One of the things that a lot of guys talked about was they marveled at how he was able to manage the business side with the fishing side and still compete on the water. You're right in the middle as far as age wise, as far as what you have with the baits, with the boats, with the companies, with everything going on. Talk about how you're able to manage that and still dominate on the water when it's so hard to do both successfully in this game.
Yeah, I think it's even tougher right now with the family aspect of it. Of course, the business side, you get pulled. When you're in your mid-20s, you don't have as much pull on you, from your sponsors and partnerships necessarily. You're grinding, you're going pre-practicing, you're preparing, you're trying to learn as much as you possibly can. And now it's definitely gotten to the point where I have way less time than I used to. And I just think you have to be. It's work-life balance and understanding how to use your time to the best of your ability. Of course, I pre-practice still a little bit, not nearly as much as I used to. I if there's a tournament like the Chowan that comes up, I'll go and spend time. And I went to the Chowan. I went to the St. Lawrence River, when I was in contention for Angler of the Year, and ran around and spent a little bit of time out there. You just can't. You have to be very. You have to be like very dialed in with your schedule and exactly what might benefit you to go and spend more time on a body of water rather than wasting a week of your time. The other thing is, like, I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old at home, Hudson and Olivia. I want to be home. It's harder to leave home now than it ever has been. It's just like my little boy loves to bass fish and loves to go fishing with dad. And he's always talking about catching a big one. And my Olivia wants her dad home. And I think that's the hardest thing for me. And it'll continue to be the hardest thing for me to just leave home with that family. And I could do a better job with it. I could, and I need to, but it's just, it's definitely it's constantly changing, man. I mean, I've asked several veterans in this sport. I won't name names, but I've had conversations with several veterans that I look up to. And I asked them, like, if you had to do it over again, like, what would you do? Like, and they're like, or what you regret. And the one thing that I see consistently is like how they manage their time with their family. And it's like, gosh, dang, like, and with tournament wins, it's one thing there. Yeah, it's Hudson and Olivia right there. They're over the top. Hudson literally, he gets off the stage and he's like, Lurch. He goes, with Lurch he's like, I have a video of him talking. Like, what does Lurch say on stage? He goes, Jacob Wheeler. Like, he'll literally say that. I have a video. It's so cute. But I mean, it's just that's, man, to me, the more that I do this, the trophies don't mean as much to me as it once did. It's really more so, like, to me, how I want to show Olivia, I want to show Hudson, I want to show them, and my family, like, that the hard work does pay off in life, and I think that's more important than any one thing. And I also really care about this sport. I really want the best for this sport. I want good, and I want the other thing I struggle with, and I look at right now, straight up between you and I, Matt, is like, I look at right now in the space and I'm like, could Jacob of 8, being 18 years old, compete in this sport or make it in this sport right now? And that's something that, like, I look back at, like, where it's at, and, like, I think that's more important to me than just the health of the sport as well. So family's one thing. I went on a big tangent there, but, like, family is a huge part of that. And then focus is changed in a lot of different ways.
Season's over, but the year is not over. Big emphasis for MLF on the team series coming up, a different format change. 2 guys, I believe, in the front of the boat working together, team tournament series. All this stuff is going to be streamed live. If I'm not correct, that kicks off in like 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Up in Erie, PA.
Oh, wow.
So they announced it, which was like, they let us know the body of, well, they don't let us know the body's water. They let us know the location of where we're going to be fishing. We can't fish within 60 miles of that area the month prior to. My wife grew up in Corey, Pennsylvania, which Corey, PA is like 20 minutes away from Erie. So it's like, I've been up that way actually quite a bit over the last 10 years. So, or 5 years. So it's interesting. It'll be interesting. I'm excited to go out there and see what's up. But then DC is my team partner. So, I mean, that's going to be fun. It's going to be a good time.
And then you guys are on the front of the boat together. Like, it's not like the earpiece thing. Like, you guys, it's like team tournament style with a camera behind you, right?
Yeah, that's the cool thing. Like, I've always been sort of more on that side of it, is like, I would be more of a fan of, like, both of us being in the boat, because that's like more team tournament bass fishing. I mean, making decisions with your buddy, going out there, trying to dissect the lake on that given day. I feel like that's such, so much more relatable to everybody out there. I mean, I grew up team tournament bass fishing, and that's what I've done, and that's what really started me in this sport was jumping in the boat with and competing in weeknighters and stuff like that. So this is going to be similar to that, but jumping on bodies of water and trying to dissect them with, what I would call one of my best friends is going to be a lot of fun.
I'll be interested. I think MLF came out with a deal that showed, like, the pairings, and there's some really good pairings. There's some really good pairings in that team event. So, yeah, I know you guys have been trying to tweak and mix and figure out a way to make that work. So I'll be interested to see how this one pans out, because I would venture to say there's way more guys that follow this that team tournament fish than that individually tournament fish.
Yeah, I would agree too. I think so. What happened was, when you have they went from 3-man teams to 2-man teams, because eventually we're going to be 50 anglers. You know what I'm saying? So we're on our way to 50 anglers. So they couldn't do 3-man teams the way it was set up. So going to 2-man teams, same boat. I think it'll be a lot of fun. I think it'll be something that it should be a good time.
All right, you are the face of the sport. You represent it. So we got to ask, you talked about the health, the transition. We are going to 65 guys next year. And just any updates on that transition? To me, it seems a little bit like right now we're not exactly sure who's in, who's out, how that process is going to work. And then when we'll just hit you with all of them at once, then let you respond. And then the rules. So, I mean, it depends on who you listen to, what you see or whatnot, but it sounds like there may be some hybrid changes. We've had a long discussion about the forward facing sonar and the format and all that. You can go back and just Google on BTL Jacob Wheeler. We don't have to get into that now, but when should the fans be looking? And I know you're just an angler, but you also are on the board or whatever what is that called? The angler committee?
The angler board. Yeah.
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 When can we expect something as far as who's in, who's out, and what you guys are going to be able to fish with technology wise in 2025? Because that's the hot topics right now.
Yeah, I think on the first part of it, I believe that MLF should be coming out with something soon. They should know the rules and breakdown of who's in and who's out. That side of it. I think, I think I know who it is, but I don't want to say without having the official point standings and knowing exactly what broke down. I haven't done all the numbers. But so that'll be out here. I would assume in the next week.
Okay.
I would expect that. As far as restrictions and all that going on, I think that's sort of a month away. I think there's a lot of conversation that's been had. Obviously, you hear so much. I know from on both sides of what should or shouldn't happen. I believe, I know that Bass had that mandatory meeting on Wednesday. They had a lot of conversation about where they thought that should be at. MLF's had some conversation. A lot of the anglers internally have had conversations with each other. I think that some sort of hybrid, would be nice. I think personally, I'd like to see that. I think it'd be cool. But I think it'll probably be a month. It'll probably take a month for that to happen. I do think it'll take a month for that to happen. I've heard a lot of rumors, just as much as everybody else. Is it going to be restricted? Is there any, how many inches are you allowed? Are you going to go down to one transducer? Are you going to go? Are you going to have, are you even allowed to have 2D? What's going to happen? So I think there's a lot that goes into this. And I think they're trying internally overall to make the right decisions. And so we'll see here probably in the next few weeks, probably what that is.
All right. I'll get back to the Angler of the Year title, and then I'll let you go. Like I said, you pulled over on the side of the road. You got the $100,000 check behind you. You're headed back home. But I've got some crazy stats for you that I'm sure that I'll get into after the break. But like I said, third Angler of the Year title in the last 4 years. Do you still get just as pumped up, just as intense, just as emotional, or at this point with 26 top 10s and 39 regular season events, a 67% top 10 rate, you win 20% of the tournaments you fish, and you're averaging $240,000 a year in the past 6 years with 8 victories. Is it to you, when you hit the water, does it become expected, or do you feel like you appreciate each Angler of the Year more than the previous one?
This one meant a lot to me. Twofold. One, because I got so close last year and I had a horrible tournament at Lake Murray. I think I was in 74th at Lake Murray, and that one hurt a lot because of the decisions I made. And I knew that just one or two decisions that day would have made the difference. It would have been a huge difference. But then also, again, having my family now, Olivia being 5 years old, Hudson not really being 2.5, almost 3. Olivia's getting to the age where she sees I'm gone all the time and sees how, so I think that there's a point of it to bring trophies home and to bring titles home, and they're important. You also learn a lot about yourself. I do think that I get pushed a lot more by people's expectations of me necessarily. I think there's a lot of people that think I don't think that way of myself. I look at an event and I try to go out there and compete as much as I can. But I think there's a lot of people oh, we already made another top 10. I do not look at it like that. I'm like, dang, I made another top 10. That's awesome. I'm pumped about it. But I feel like it's almost the point now, if I have a tough tournament, it's what happened to Wheeler, rather than if you didn't make a top 10, what happened to Wheeler? And I'm like, that's crazy to think that way. You know what I'm saying? Which I know it's a blessing and a curse to be in that position, because it's just people they're not great job anymore. It's oh, well, yeah, you're supposed to catch them. So it does push you a little bit harder. But I told my good buddy Kyle Welcher this, and I said last year when he was competing for Angler of the Year, and I told him, I said, look, man, you never will know that you have another gear in you until you start competing for the Angler of the Year titles. You have there's something in each angler, and some anglers just don't have it, is when you go and you get pushed by your competition and you continue to compete. and you're competing for Angler of the Year, you just have this completely different mindset of like, I'm going to win or I'm going to make a top 10. You're not happy with just a top 50 cut. You're not happy with a top 20. You're getting pushed so hard by the top anglers in that league to compete at a different level that truly does happen. And it's a completely different gear than a lot of us can traditionally are in. And that is something that's fun, but it's also extremely mentally and physically exhausting when you're in that gear. It's not an easy task to stay there. But I appreciate each season and each tournament because they all have their different stories. And this year was a special one.
Yeah, that's cool. You talk about those guys. I mean, I just did a list of them, like Denny, Skeet, Larry Nixon, KVD, Thrift, Andy Morgan, Dudley for a while. Like those are the guys that Edwin for a number of years. Like there's like a sweet spot where they just go unconscious.
Yeah. Like you can't even appreciate it until it's done. Like, and I don't even fathom, like I can't even comprehend and appreciate where I'm at right now in the sport because you don't want to get complacent. You don't want to like celebrate it and worries that, like, and I'm not just, I as soon as I won Angler of the Year, I thought, like, how do I win this tournament on the St. Lawrence? It's always the next goal. It's always the next event. It's always the next, all right, how do you win the team series? What's going to go on there? Like, you don't really want to look back because it's so good that you can't even, you don't want to like, it's hard to explain. Mm-hmm. It really is. Like, I don't want to be satisfied with what I've overachieved what my goals were. Probably, I mean, guaranteed over when I was like 18, 19 years old. I mean, I'd be like, oh my gosh, but you just want to keep pushing yourself. You want to keep, like, how do you keep that up? And but then also trying to the family of the life, family and work balance side of it comes into the equation too. So it's a weird spot to be in because they all mean a lot. They're just, now it's different for different reasons.
That's awesome. How much longer you got on your drive?
Like 10 hours. So call me after the show. We'll get a call after.
Yeah. I'll let you go. I appreciate it, dude. That's big league pulling over to jump on BTL a couple days after winning your third BPT Angler of the Year in the past 4 years.
Man, I always appreciate. I always enjoy talking with you, man. I always do, man. On and off the air, it's always you always make me think, and I appreciate you guys. You always have me on.
Thanks, Jacob. Drive safe.
See y'all.
See ya. All right, that is the one and only Jacob Wheeler pulling over on the side of the road. Hopefully, remember, Jacob, take your phone off of Do Not Disturb so people can call you again. There you go. I get some guys, sometimes they put it on the Do Not Disturbs because it kicks them off if they call. And then they don't put it, and then they miss all their calls for the rest of the week. So we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, we'll break down more how historic this win is. I also want to dive into how incredibly good Michael Neal is in getting his second BPT win. We touched a little bit on it with Jacob Wheeler, but there's a number of anglers, including a couple BTL regular guests who are kind of in limbo right now as far as, are they going to requalify? Are they not going to requalify? And then a lot of crazy stuff went on and is still going on the Bassmaster Elite Series on Lake Champlain right now, but it's back for another full live week of shows in studio from Shawnee, Oklahoma. This is BTL on Monday, August 12th, and we'll be back right after this.
The new Puma STS has been redesigned from the ground up. With the angler, design, function, and performance in mind, nothing on this new offering was compromised, and the only thing carried over from the previous version is the name. Based on the Soft Touch series hull that started with the flagship Jaguar, this new model is nimble and performs incredibly well at all speeds with either a 250 or 300 horsepower engine. Featuring a new 96-inch wide-body footprint, this hull measures out at 20 foot 7 inches in length. Industry-leading design coupled with tournament-winning performance. The Puma STS from Basscat. Feel the rush.
everything you need, one legendary brand. Top on Strike King.
Gear that just plain works. Cast after cast after cast. AFTCO. Any fish, any water.
Gamakatsu, the innovation leader in fish hooks, is launching Nano Alpha technology in 2024. Nano Alpha is a new finish available on Gamakatsu's most popular hook styles. It delivers 2 times slicker performance, 4 times better corrosion resistance. Nano Alpha technology makes the world's greatest fish hooks even better in 2024 to help anglers catch more fish.
Born in Japan, using technology, innovation, and precision, Sunline produces the widest selection of fishing lines at the most technologically advanced line factory in the world. Manufactured at the strictest tolerances to produce victories at the highest levels of tournament bass fishing. From household names like Christie, Swindle, and Cruz, to young guns like Cook, Logan, New, and Welcher, they all trust Sunline to take them to the top of the leaderboard. Choose the line that will give you the strength to guarantee your confidence. Sunline.
Yes.
Fishing isn't just a hobby, it's an obsession. Whether it's blazing hot or bitterly cold, bright sunshine, raining, or even snowing, someplace, somewhere, there's a fish that's ready to bite. And as the angler, you need baits that will catch the fish anywhere, anytime, no matter the conditions. From throwing topwaters to cranking the depths, know the baits to throw. Choose Spro.
Denali Fishing has me covered on the Bassmaster Opens, from their line of high-end rods, from the Android series all the way to the Tack series, the Novus series bait casting reels, all the way to the Covert series of tungsten in the cylindrical and the teardrop shapes. Denali has everything to keep me covered, whether I'm finesse fishing for smallmouth on the Great Lakes or flipping for largemouth in the slop down in Florida. The complete lineup is always on my deck and in my boxes. Denali Fishing. All right, welcome back. BTL on a Monday. Let's crunch some numbers. I kind of mentioned some of these things to Jacob Wheeler before, but I think it is well worth revisiting them, just how dominant he's been in the 6-year history of the Bass Pro Tour that started in 2019. We had a little bit of a truncated year there in 2020 with only like 4 events, but 39 regular season events, 26 top 10s, like I said, 67% of the regular season. This doesn't include heavy hitters, Red Crest team stuff, nothing. We're just doing straight up regular season BPT, 80-man field, 79 for the majority of this season. 67%. He has 8 wins during that time, a 20% win ratio. KVD at like the height of his career was at like a 13% tournament to win ratio. Now that also included some E50s, some opens, some invitationals, and the Elite Series. So take that into account, that all of these are 80-man fields, not 100, 120, 220, 40. You know, that KVD also throws some postseason in there that only had 12 to 15 anglers in there. I didn't run the numbers just on straight regular seasons for KVD, but at the height, he was at 13%. That puts things into perspective with Jacob Wheeler at 20%. And over the course of that time, he's averaged $240,000 a year in earnings. Now, that's not incentives. That's not Red Crest. That's not team series. That's not heavy hitters. That's just $240,000 on regular season earnings in the 6 years, starting in 2024 and then working back to 2019. His finishes are first, third, and fourth in the Angler of the Year standings. He has never finished outside of the top 4 in the Angler of the Year standings, and headed to Red Crest next spring on Lake Gunnersville, where he will definitely be one of the favorites there. Absolutely insanely dominant performance for what he's done. He launched his own boat at the Bassmaster Classic a couple years ago. The Crush City stuff through Rapala is flying off the shelves. He's got a lot going on, and it's impressive to see what Jacob Wheeler has done. Equally as impressive is what Michael Neal has done. We saw him a couple years ago win back-to-back Angler of the Year titles in the MLF Tackle Warehouse Invitational Series, pick up a win there. We saw him win his first BPT event, and then come into a very trying final day of the season with everything kind of on the line for the $100,000 at the St. Lawrence. Just a nasty weather for the second half of the day, and just pull ahead of the field to get his second BPT win. I think it meant a lot to him. He talked about how he'd had some close calls on the St. Lawrence River, and then it was cool to see some stuff that had really played in the past for him that he kind of relied on in those final moments to pull away from John Hunter and Hatfield and the rest of the guys to get the win. I touched on this a little bit, and I don't know, so I'm not going to speak because I don't know 100%, but we're going to have Matt Steffen on Wednesday morning. We're originally going to have him on tomorrow, but we're going to reschedule that and then slide Wednesday show down to Wednesday afternoon. That'll run next Monday when I'm up in Minnesota for the Bassmaster Open up there. But the way that they're doing it, so they're originally going to cut to 50. There's a massive backlash. Like I said, I did a whole show with Jacob Wheeler about this months ago. So they went to 65, which means there's like 20 guys that are going to get cut from the BPT this year because they're bringing on the 5 invitational rookies. That gave a group of anglers, including Matt Steffen, who's a regular here on BTL, like basically 1 year to finish in the top because you have career averages, but you also have some guys that might be dropping out. We haven't had a year on the BPT where a couple of guys didn't either retire, drop out, move, quit, the whole 9 yards. But there are about 5 anglers that are on a very tedious cut line as to whether or not they're going to be fishing the Bass Pro Tour again next year. One of those is Fred Rambanis, who we just had on the show, and he actually just posted this literally right before the show went live this morning. This is what he said. This season has been one of the most trying in my life, but I look forward to getting healthy and coming back stronger than ever. Kind of glad I didn't take points away from anyone needing them for the MLF big cut next year. I'm banking on my career average to keep me in. Regardless, there will be 20 guys I've worked with over the past 2 decades that I consider family that may be moving on to other leagues, and I'm truly sad. It really shouldn't be like this. I'm just a guy who chases a dream at the top and will continue to, no matter where I land next year. Super grateful for all my sponsors, family, friends who have stood behind me for the past 20 years. The future is great, and God is good. I love you all. Like I said, there's a number of crazy talented anglers who have done this full time for the past 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years. That right now, Wheeler said, he thinks around a week is when we'll actually know. But as far as moving, there are a couple Legends exemptions available at Bass. If you look at the most recent Bassmaster Open on Lake St. Clair, I was cruising down the lake out in front of the mile roads, and I was like, by God, it's Randy Howell. Old Randy, he's got a Gunnersville Bassmaster Classic win under his belt. Qualify as a Legends exemptions. He talked about how he's fishing the northern division of the Opens. Hasn't officially said what his thought process is with that, but you could speculate that he might be in that. Yeah, Clay said, yeah, Casey Ashley is another one. He also is fishing the Bassmaster Opens. He also has a Bassmaster Classic victory under his belt. So that could also kind of, if they're up in the career average, but then they end up taking Legends exemptions and going to Bass, I don't know if they could just be fishing the Opens for their pure love of competition and being like, that looks like a good schedule. Haven't talked to them individually. They haven't said anything publicly about that either. But that would also allow a couple anglers who would have been cut. Now, would it go down to like the rookies who only had the 1 year? Would it go down to the career average? I don't know how that's going to work out, but definitely some interesting scenarios to pay attention to, especially if you're a fan of the sport on that BPT side. All right, let's switch over to the Elite Series side. Still currently going on right now is the final day on Lake Champlain. Ed Lochran, a crazy performance with a jig with primarily largemouth over the first 3 days. You're listening to this on the iTunes replay. You most likely know how it works out, but here's where it's important. So Justin Hamner came into the final 2 Northern Open stops with a slight lead, fairly substantial lead, but he had a number of really talented anglers chasing him down who catch him up north. Most notably the Johnson brothers, JT Tompkins. He had Cody Huff, bunch of different guys. Anyway, the way it shook out is Hamner turned in and I texted him and he said, dude, it was rough out there on the third day. At 17 pounds, but he finished like in the top 30 and actually going into today, the final day, has a 14-point lead over Chris Johnson. Then there's a little bit of a gap between third and fourth. So right now, outside shot would be JT Tompkins and Trey McKinney, who had a shot to really jump up. He only had like 14 pounds on the third day of competition, and Hamner was able to kind of separate that lead. So Trey went from dominating the Angler of the Year. He had that unfortunate incident where his day's catch was disqualified for coming in late, having a family member call him on it. So he finished like 90th. And so Hamner has a 14-point lead on Chris Johnson. Johnson was third after the third day. So he's going to have, at minimum, a 12-point lead going into the final Elite Series tournament this week with only 2 days of practice on the St. Lawrence River. He's going to have a maximum of a 20-point lead, which it doesn't look like that because Chris is catching him today. So I would say he'd have about a 13 to 15-point lead, meaning if you know Chris Johnson's history on the St. Lawrence River, Justin Hamner is going to have the top 20 at the very least. The St. Lawrence River, place where he has had success, where the weather looks like it's going to be shaping up, where they're taking out of Waddington, but they're going to be able to make the long runs, it looks like, in order to be the first angler since Kevin Van Dam in 2011. He did it back-to-back in 2010 and 2011 to win the Bassmaster Classic and the Angler of the Year in the same season. He would do a Bassmaster Classic, a Century Belt, and the Angler of the Year for one of the good guys in the sport. It would be absolutely insane. But Jacob Fouts isn't making things easy either. Fouts, let me look at the standings right here. So Fouts also has made the top 10, but he was 3 points behind Chris Johnson on that. So it looks to be like it's a 3-man race, because I don't see any of those guys. I don't see Fouts or Chris Johnson finishing outside the top 30 at the St. Lawrence. Crazier things have happened, but JT and Trey McKinney at 634 and 633, and Jay Shakurit, who was the first one to break 100 pounds there at 633, but they're over like right at 40 points back. It looks like it's between Hamner, Chris Johnson, and Jacob Fouts. Johnson and Fouts need to finish as high as they can this week, today, on the St. Lawrence to go in about 15 points back. So regardless, a top 12 for Justin Hamner wins him the Angler of the Year on the St. Lawrence. Anything else, he's taking his fate out of his hands. And I would be shocked if Chris Johnson isn't in the top 5 at the St. Lawrence and Fouts doesn't make the top 10 as well. So that's a lot to kind of digest and look at, but it is an Angler of the Year race, something that you don't get every year. It's kind of like going to Game 7 in the Stanley Cup Finals, which is what we ended up having, but one of those deals where it'll be fun to watch next week on the St. Lawrence. Now, when it comes to the Bassmaster Classic cut line, this is going to change, but with one left projected, the last man in right now is Greg Hackney, last year's Angler of the Year, Kyle Welcher. Polinick had all of his fish die with like 15 pounds. His live well pumps went out, and then you can't make that up on Lake Champlain. So he dropped to 37th. He's only like 8 points to the good right now. The first 3 or 4 guys out, you have Koya Fujita, Alex Weatherall, Bob Downey, Brock Mosley. Bob Downey's in 43rd. Let me see if yeah, Bob Downey's in 43rd and didn't even fish on the Harris chain. I think he had like a kid or something went down, but since then he's gone 15th, 34th, 40th, 14th, and had a good event here and started the year. Wow, that would be insane if Bob Downey was able to I just saw that was able to make the Bassmaster Classic. Mosley, Gussie, Jonathan Kelly, Shane LaHue, and Brian Schmidt, Greg DePalma, and Matty Wong round out the top 50. And then right now going into the last ones that are in are Stetson, Blaylock, Drew Cook, Polinick, Summerall, Welcher, and Hackney. Hackney had a really good comeback in this event. Over on the BPT side, it's done. It's over. Congratulations. We mentioned him earlier in the show. Mark Davis sliding into the final Red Crest qualification slot in that 39th. Edwin Evers started the year not fantastically. He made a jump to get back in it. The first couple out, Gerald Spohr, James Elam, Marty Robinson, Dean Rojas, who had a really good season in a number of events this year. And then you can also go over and see he made the heavy hitters. So, all right, that's all we got for today. Working on a show for tomorrow. It's kind of an interesting week because you've got the Elite Series guys that are finishing up today. This is like their only off day. Then they only get 2 days of practice before that tournament starts on Lake St. Clair. You got a lot of the BPT guys. Some of them are staying up north and fishing. A lot of them are kind of driving home with poor cell service. But on Wednesday morning, Matt Steffen joins BTL to talk about his situation that he's in. We're also going to kind of go more in depth on the in-fisherman quest that we are going to do this fall. We're going to attempt to catch all 28 species master angler size for in-fishermen. And then looking forward to next week, I'm actually recording a show this week. It's going to include Jody White from MLF. Guy knows more about the invitationals and the BPT, the angler styles, how they fish. Pete Robbins, freelancer who does a lot of work with bass. And then we're also going to bring in an angler who's very well in the know. That would be AJ Jr., Alton Jones Jr. He finished 3rd in the BPT Angler of the Year this year. We are going to put together the criteria and the definitive top 10 list of the top 10 live scopers, forward-facing sonar experts in competitive bass fishing today. We're going to include the invitationals, the BPT, the Opens, the Elite Series, and the NPFL. And we're going to put together the list of right now who the top 10 pure scopers are in the game today. That'll really piss off about 9 of you that listen to this show. But the way I'm looking at it, non-controversial. We're not going to get into ethics, morality, any of that. It'd be the same as putting together the top 10 flippers, the top 10 offshore fishermen, the top 10 sight fishermen, the top 10 grass fishermen. But I am curious to see between Jody and Pete what they've seen following and really diving in depth for the anglers and their respective tours that they cover, as well as an angler who is in the know, who works and talks to all these guys on a daily basis and competes against them. I think it'll be a shocking and very interesting list. So that's all we got for today. Big shout out to Jacob Wheeler. Congrats on his on yet another BPT Angler of the Year. Head over to Bassmaster, watch the rest of that stuff go down, see if Ed Locker can bust another 5.5 pound largie on a jig and close this thing out. He's got a little bit of a lead, but it's Champlain, so anybody in the top 10 has a chance. We'll be back 8:30 a.m. Central Time tomorrow. See ya.